I want to say it's a great honor and a privilege to be here. And I want to introduce the host of our speaker, Dr. Hatim Issac. He is a member of Peachtree Corner Baptist Church, but he is born in Gaza, in Gaza, and every day calls his mother. And his mother was a member of an Orthodox church. The stone building is 1,600 years old. It's a UNESCO building, and they destroyed it. But he is, checking on his mother and his church and the relative. I want to do 2-3 things. One is, this is excellent, the map. This has come, if Americans knew. Basically, I want you to fall in love with the bottom line, if Americans knew. Excellent. The other one is an excellent one because it's done by an American-Israeli professor. On the left side, the Zionist framing. On the right side, the human right framing. It's excellent the way he did it. This is excellent for us who are Christians. The two covenant, a fellow by the name of Alex Awad, the colleague of our speaker, it's excellent. Everything in the front grid, you have a scripture to back it. So if you want the scripture, you have it there, okay? And the last thing I put is about Rachel. She's an American young woman that went to volunteer in Gaza. And she was living in a home of a medical doctor. And because they want to destroy the home, she refused to leave. And that bulldozer by the Israeli soldier crushed her going and coming back. Okay. The last thing, I have some copies. This is the best copy from Ilan Pappy, Haifa University professor, now is in England, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. The power of this book is Israeli and British sources. And he is the one that tells you that when Israel was created, they destroyed 530 villages and towns and exiled 1 million people out. And it tells you how it happened. I mean, you're talking about history. This is excellent. Now, the people who love Bible, this British man by the name of Colin Chapman, he's excellent. He takes you from Genesis to Revelation and share with you that a lot of the theology that you and I see on television and a lot of the Left Behind series and all of that, that's not biblical. It's excellent if you love the Bible. It's excellent for a Bible study. Our speaker was born in Palestine. He's a Christian and got his PhD in the US, and now he have 4 jobs. One is the dean of the Bethlehem Bible College. He's a professor, he's a lecturer, he's a writer, and he's the head of something called Christ at the Checkpoint. He wants good old evangelical Americans to come, deal with the scripture, but see the ground. And I hope we can host a same conference here in Atlanta. These people love Jesus, love the church, and love the mission of the church, but they come on Friday because they love the food, okay? Welcome. Oh, you already have yours.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Good. Thank you, Reverend Fahd, for the introduction. My name is Munther, from the town of Beit Sahour, next to Bethlehem. Town of Beit Sahour is known also as the Shepherd's Field, the place where the good news to the whole world came from. Born and raised in that town. And right now, as Reverend Fahd said, I wear multiple hats. I'm a theologian, professor, a writer, but more importantly, I'm a pastor as well. I pastor the Evangelical Lutheran Christmas Church at the heart of Bethlehem, the main Protestant church in Bethlehem. And in fact, as a denomination, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land, we enjoy a very good and strong relationship with the PCUSA Church. And we host delegations all the time, and there is so much cooperation between our two communities, and in particular the congregation in Bethlehem. We have sister church relationships with two Presbyterian churches, the one in Minneapolis, Westminster Presbyterian Church, and one in Chicago in Evanston Presbyterian Church. I grew up in Palestine. I grew up under difficult circumstances. I originally studied civil engineering before sensing a call to go to ministry and study theology. And that's what I did. I spent some time in the United States at Westminster Theological Seminary in Philadelphia. Came back, and I've been with the Bible College since then, and then did my PhD actually in England, in Oxford, not in the US, but that's the same. You don't tell that to British people that it's the same, but it's a degree. I'm grateful that you want to hear from a Palestinian. Thank you for the invitation. At the same time, I wish I was here in different circumstances. I wish it was safe to be here, given what's happening back home. With the war that I have called a war of a genocide for a long time, and I have advocated for a ceasefire, like most Palestinians, that has killed right now officially more than 40,000 people on paper. Those are the ones we know. Those are the ones we have the numbers, the names, and the registration number. Many, many more are still under the rubble. This includes more than 16,000 children, 2,000 infants. Most recently, just 3 days ago, a twin infant were killed by an airstrike. They were 4 days old. It was very traumatic and tragic because the father had just left to get the registration and to register his two newborn twins. He got the papers. He went back to find that his wife, his two twins, were completely shot and burned by the airstrike. What's happening in Gaza is really, really horrific. It's hell on earth. Hatem can tell you the stories that we hear from Gaza all the time and that we see on our social media. It's really heartbreaking. People are being killed in numerous ways, including by starvation. I mean, we live in a time that people are literally being killed right now, not by famine, please, but by starvation. Gaza, which has close to 2 million people or more, most of them now are displaced. The vast majority of them are displaced. More than 60% of the homes are destroyed. Estimation says that it's going to take more than 85 years to rebuild Gaza. I hope we begin to see what's happening. This is not a war against a militant group. This is an annihilation of a whole community, to the extent that on purpose, universities were not just bombs, by the way. The universities were not bombed. The universities not bombed from the sky. They were, they put dynamite in the buildings and destroyed them. They don't want life to go back in Gaza. It's very clear what Israel is doing. More than 12 universities completely destroyed. Hospitals are no longer functioning under the pretext that Hamas works from underground these hospitals. None of that was proved. Not a single hospital was proved to actually host Hamas militants or Hamas headquarters, as we were told. It's really terrible. And among the 2.3 million Palestinians who are in Gaza, right now there is about, I would say, 600 to 700 Christians left. The Christian community, most of whom live in the Gaza city, in the center of the Gaza Strip. When the war broke, they decided to take refuge in the two main churches in the middle of the city. The historic St. Porphyrios Orthodox Church. This is one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. And, many of you maybe have done pilgrimage in the land and you visited the churches. What I don't know how much the tour guides or what you see people focus on is, it's not just the buildings that have existed for a long time. It's the people. So when we say Gaza is the oldest Christian, I don't even, because when we say it's the oldest Christian church, one of the oldest Christian churches in the world, people think it's the building. But it's actually the ongoing witness of a community. Yet sadly, right now, we believe that this war will bring an end to this community. So some have taken refuge in the Orthodox Church, and some have taken refuge in the Catholic Church. They live on mattresses, in classrooms, in halls. They live as a community, try to eat very simple food, whatever is possible. I'm not sure they have had meat in 10 months. They're lucky when they have eggs or clean water. Many have been killed in the churches for lack of medicine, because there are no hospitals and medicine. So if you are in the churches now and you get sick, chances to survive are very low because there is no medicine or any medical care. So especially the elderly are the most impacted by this phenomenon. 3 weeks into this war, the Orthodox Church was bombed. 18 people were killed in that strike, including 9 children. And few months later, just before Christmas, 2 elderly women in the Catholic Church were shot by a sniper at the courtyard of the church. They were leaving the sanctuary to go to another building. Others were killed outside of the church from the Christian community. I mean, it's literally hell on earth. And the fact that this has been going for 10 months shocks me to the extent that we're asking, where is humanity? So what is the message of the church, and how do we understand what's happening in Gaza? And as a Palestinian pastor who's been advocating all over for a ceasefire, I don't know, I've been to the White House to advocate for a ceasefire, to the State Department, to the Congress. I go all over the media, among many of my colleagues. What do we want people to understand about this war? What is the message we carry about this war? And so what we wish to tell the Christian church in the United States in particular is that, first of all, this war did not start in October 7th. We're troubled when people continue to ignore the context. Because when you ignore the context, you isolate one incident and make it the cause. And when you isolate the incident, you don't understand the motive. And so most of the media describes October 7th as a hate attack by Muslims who don't like Jews, who hate Jews. Not only is this a mischaracterization of what happened in October 7th, it's dehumanizing to the Palestinians to describe us as hateful. And please understand something. When we try to say you have to understand the context, we are by no means justifying what happened on October 7th or supporting it. I am a pastor. I can't support killing people. As a theologian, I have written extensively on nonviolence and why I believe in nonviolence. Moreover, children were killed. Children were kidnapped. So we can't support that. But where did this come from? What led us to October 7th is what we continue to insist. Please look at not just the whole of history, but the recent history. So please allow me to go first through the history in general, but then the recent history, because I think it's really important to highlight that. We have been saying that this war did not start on October 7th, but it started in 1948, with the displacement of 800,000 Palestinians to create the state of Israel. Friends, Israel was not created on empty land. The state of Israel was created on the ruins of the towns and villages of Palestinians. 500,000 villages were completely destroyed so that the new Jewish Zionist immigrants could build the state, which led to the displacement, forcible displacement of 800,000 Palestinians. This is called ethnic cleansing. These are not my words. These are the words of most respected historians, including Israeli historians like Ilan Pappé. In fact, even the Zionist historians say, yes, we expelled thousands of Palestinians on purpose because we had to. So they admit that they did it. Even the Zionists admit that what happened in 1948 was the crime of ethnic cleansing. 80% of the people of Gaza, 80% of the current people of Gaza were actually displaced from 1948. So they are Nakba survivors. So I hope you understand what we're talking about here. These are people displaced once, and now they're displaced twice. And they continue to ask, where is justice? What is the fault of those Palestinians other than being in the land in which Zionist Jews decided to create a state? Because this is what happened. Again, Zionism, we have to understand what Zionism is. Zionism sought to establish a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine. Do you all agree about that? Zionism is the establishment of a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine. What's the problem? Palestine is not empty. Palestine had people. To do that, to create a homeland for the Jewish people, that means we have to empty the land. And this is what happened in 1948. Friends, this is the root of the problem. This problem has not been solved since then. So all of that began in 1948, the displacement of Palestinians, and then the continuous occupation of our land, because after 1948 and the establishment of the State of Israel, Israel forced the other Palestinian community that was not occupied in 1948 or defeated in 1948, has been living since 1967 under a system of military occupation in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. And in this small territory, which is 22% of the land. So you have to understand now, Israel took 78% to create a state. What is remaining now is 22%. Israel controls the 22% through the military and has been engaged in building settlements in that 22% and fragmenting it and pushing, suffocating Palestinians into small, crowded communities. So I live in those 22%, which, by the way, the 22 includes Gaza. And in the West Bank, to go from one block to the other, and I want you to imagine if this room is the West Bank, Palestinians live only on the tables. The vast majority of the West Bank is fully controlled by Israel. This is the 22%. They build settlements, they have the military, they have roads. To go from one table to table, we have to go through a checkpoint going in, a checkpoint going out, controlled by Israel. These days, it's even dangerous because of the settlers who live in between and have been very violent against Palestinians. In other words, life in the West Bank under the Israeli occupation has always been very difficult, and it's actually much more difficult today. For 16 years before the war, Gaza was under a very, very strict siege that controlled, and I kid you not, the amount of calories that entered Gaza. Israel controlled the amount of, they will calculate how much calorie would enter Gaza so that they make sure the people of Gaza don't thrive. This is how dehumanizing the siege were. So those who committed the attacks on October 7th not only are victims of 1948 or the descendants of those victims living in refugee camps. But then they lived the first uprising, the second uprising, multiple wars under the siege, and this very much brutal siege. And we ask ourselves, why is this ignored? Why isn't anybody talking about the reality that led us to October 7th? And why isn't anybody talking about the numerous reports that declared the reality in Palestine using the term apartheid? Do you understand what apartheid is? I hope you do. Apartheid as a war crime, or even a crime against humanity, that the whole world united to say, we cannot have apartheid anymore. Apartheid first existed in South Africa. You have to understand that apartheid is not limited to South Africa. In other words, it has now a definition accepted by the international community, so that the South African experience isn't repeated somewhere else. Apartheid is based on the idea of segregation and supremacy based on ethnicity. Over the last 5 or 6 years, we have numerous reports, and I mean numerous reports, by legal organizations, human rights organizations, church organizations, Israeli Jewish organizations, all saying what is happening in the land today is a system of Jewish supremacy defined by the international law as apartheid. We've been living under apartheid, friends. Yet no one talks about this. And you look at what the Western media has done. The siege, the blockade over Gaza is ignored. Apartheid is ignored. 1948 and the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians is ignored. And all they talk about is October 7th. And one of the things, I've been challenging Western audience with is that, you've been appalled by, for example, the kidnapping of children on October 7th. I hope everyone in this room agrees that kidnapping children is wrong and evil and must be condemned. I hope we all agree on that, right? Why have you been silent over the constant kidnapping of Palestinian children year after year after year? Hundreds every year. Hundreds. Or why are you silent about the fact that since October 7th, and I kid you not, 9,000 Palestinians have been kidnapped. Now, Israel might call this arrested, but oftentimes they are held without charges. No charges, you're just held, administrative detention. You can't have a lawyer, no trial, and especially in the last 10 months, tortured, raped, killed in detention. All of that is documented. All of that. I'm not making any allegations. Tortured, raped, killed in detention. No one talks about Palestinians. Why? Are we less human? Why is it that on average, for the last 10 years before October 7th, every year, Israel arrests around 300 to 400 Palestinian children? So if you were appalled by the kidnapping of the Israeli children and were silent over the treatment of Palestinian children for the last years, I have the right as a Palestinian to say you have no moral credibility. Unless you think one people are less equal in worth than the others. This is our outrage as Palestinians. No one is talking about our suffering. Yet one horrific incident against Israelis, and the whole world goes crazy and accepts a war of genocide against the Palestinians. And if you think that what Israel is doing is an appropriate response to what happened on October 7th, morally, I have a problem with that. If you think it's okay to kill 40,000 Palestinians, destroy an entire population as a revenge for the killing of 1,000 Israelis, there's a serious problem here. But this is what's been happening. And by the way, the person committing all of this was just celebrated in the Congress. That's why we as Palestinians are outraged. Where is the international law? You know that by the international law, in warfare, by the international law in warfare, it is considered a war crime to deny electricity, water, food, and medicine. Do you know this? Day one after the war, day 1 or 2, the Israeli Minister of War said, we will deny Palestinians food, water, medicine, electricity, I think, fuel. The guy admitted we are going to commit a war crime, and he did it. They are in the Congress celebrating. Where is the integrity? Does the international law matter? Or it only applies on other countries, but not on America and Israel? You see the outrage of Palestinians? You see why we're so angry about this? My second point, and our second point to the church, is that all of this has been happening under the pretext of the Bible and religion. And it's really important to stress that. When Jews came to Palestine, not all of them, the majority, the Zionist Jews from Europe, and when they decided to create a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine, they needed a pretext. The pretext was the Bible. And they knew too well that they can rely on Christians to justify that. Hence, the Bible was used to support the Zionist claims to the land of Palestine based on history and, in many cases, theology. History, Jews lived here. Jews lived in Palestine. Theology, there is a covenant between God and the Jewish people, and God gave the land to the Jewish people as an eternal possession. That's why the colonialism of Palestine, the colonization of Palestine, was described not as colonialism, even though the Zionists said we are going to start. The Zionists themselves said this is colonialism. I mean, if you read the books, what they were describing, what they were doing in Palestine, they knew they were creating a new colonies in Palestine. Yet in the Christian world, it's not colonialism, it's Jews returning to their land. This is how it is described. And I'm not just talking about the evangelical fundamentalist churches, I'm talking about mainline liberal churches. It's very common, even in Presbyterian circles, to say Jews returned to their land. And I want you to think for a moment in that simple phrase, Jews returned to their land. If you were in my shoe as a Palestinian, what would you do when you hear this? Because all of a sudden, I'm stripped of my right to the land because it's not my land anymore. You, in your comfort zone, making these theological statements, took the land from me and declared it as if it belongs to someone else. Now they're returning. So my fault as a Palestinian is I have been occupying someone else's land. Apparently, we didn't get the memo that God gave this land to someone else thousands of years ago, and we shouldn't have been here from the first place. I hope you understand what you're imposing on the Palestinians to accept. And by the way, when Palestinians say this is Palestinian land, we are not making political statements. When I say this is a Palestinian land or this is our land, we're talking about land we've inherited and farmed and took care of for generations upon generations upon generations upon generations. We can show you our family records. Now, all of a sudden, we've been told by the Christian West that Jews are returning to their land as if now we must give space. And I continue to ask, are you listening to yourself in terms of what you are asking Palestinians to accept? In fact, what you are imposing on Palestinians. And I thought the United States is all about religious liberty. But somehow, millions of Palestinians must accept the fact that this is Jewish land. Whether you believe in this or not, you must accept it. This is what has been imposed on us. And somehow, the whole world was convinced that there is a direct connect between what God said thousands of years ago to Abraham and his offspring and the secular state in the Middle East today. And I ask myself, seriously? Is this actually sound exegesis of that? Is this really how we understand the biblical text? We can make a jump from biblical text to a secular state today, to the extent that now you have congressmen and women, friends, congressmen and women, repeating phrases like Genesis 12, if you bless Israel, God will bless you. And if you stand against Israel, God will curse you. I'm not sure if you watch the Congress discussion about Columbia University and the discussions about the student encampments in Columbia University. One congressman asked the president of Columbia, who resigned yesterday, I think, have you read the Bible? Have you read Genesis 12? And the president of Columbia was actually confused. She didn't know what to say. And he says, do you want to stand against God? Because the Bible says, if you stand against the Jewish people, you stand against God. This is not John Hagee in a Bible study. This is a congressman talking to the president of one of the most prestigious universities in the United States. And I'm listening to this, and I am horrified. I'm horrified on multiple levels. First of all, imagine if it was Ilhan Omar telling that person, have you read the Quran? Do you know what the Quran says about opposing Muslims? Imagine if she said that. What would happen? Aziz, what would happen? Yet somehow this accepted? Seriously? Isn't this manipulation of the text? Forcing people to accept a certain ideology so that God or else? I'm horrified by this discourse. Really? And then as a pastor and theologian, I could, this is a textbook of how the Bible is not just misinterpreted and abused, but weaponized, politicized. Friends, Genesis 12 talks about God's blessings to the nation through Abraham and his offspring. That offspring is Christ, according to Galatians 3:16. It's clear. It can't be disputed. Galatians 3:16, Abraham had what? One offspring, not many, and that offspring is Christ. In Romans 3, it says the blessing of Abraham did get to the nations through Christ, through his death and resurrection. You turn a marvelous, marvelous promise of blessing the nations through the risen Christ into a text that weaponizes injustice against Palestinians. I'm shocked. I'm shocked. And no one challenges that. And again, this is not Pat Robertson on the 700 Club. This is a congressman. So I want you to see how the Bible is part of this, to the extent that in one of the most horrific contexts in the world today, you have a situation which we're being told that rather than solving the conflict by going to the international law and human rights, the reference point has become a religious text. And I will continue to say, show me one other context around the world in which we ignore the international law and go to a religious text. Show me. And even the historical argument, by the way, when you think of it, it's actually baseless. What do I mean? Did Jews live in Palestine for generations? Yes. Was there always a Christian presence in the land? Yes. A Jewish presence? Yes. Do I deny the Bible? No, I believe in the Bible. Were other nations in the land over the years? Oh, definitely yes. Did they live longer than the Jews? Definitely yes. Did they have more prominent civilizations? Yes. Does a physical presence of a certain religious community in one place give them political rights thousands of years later? No. Where did we get this idea? 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Do you see what I'm saying? Yes, Jews lived in the land. Does that give them the right to come thousands of years later and say any Jewish person can live in this land and dispossess the Palestinians? To the extent, and listen to me, a Jewish person born in Atlanta today can immigrate to our land, become a citizen of Israel, have more rights in this system of apartheid because he or she is Jewish, can even live in settlements confiscated from Palestinians and Palestinian Christians, on land confiscated by force from Palestinians, move freely in the land, whereas a Palestinian indigenous who's been living in that land, including your siblings, Palestinian Christians, continue to have their rights denied all the time. Based on this flawed theological logic that has been so prominent in Christian circles. And so we come here to say, enough. Not just enough to the occupation and the policies and what's happening, and enough of this war we call for, we pray for, we urge for a ceasefire, and an end to all of this, and for justice to prevail. But we also say enough to the weaponization of the Bible. It's time we listen. We do theology in a different way. It's time we listen to Palestinians. It's time we listen to Palestinian theologians. It's time that this whole way of reading scripture that has led us to this moment. So people are dying, and I'm not exaggerating at all when I say the Western Church has a role in this. People are being killed in horrific ways. Enough to this way of reading scripture. This war must end. It must end soon. If we have any ethical and moral credibility as people of faith and as Christians, we must call for those who commit war crimes to be held accountable. Otherwise, all of our ethics make no sense. And then there must be justice. And the way forward to me is simple. Israel controls every inch of the land right now through military force, and through its might. We as Palestinians basically have no authority on anything. Israel controls every little thing, from water to electricity, to land, to above the land, to the waves, to the family registration system, to where we can build, to whom we can marry, to where we can live. Everything is controlled by Israel. They have established a very sophisticated and high-tech system of control and supremacy, funded by the world and especially US tax money, and under the political cover of the United States. Israel has to choose right now. 3 minutes. Israel has to choose. They control the land. What to do with the 7 million Palestinians that live in the land? It's a simple choice. They can listen to the international community and to what Palestinians have accepted many years ago, to divide the land into two pieces. The sad reality is that Palestinians accepted a state on only 22% of the land. 22, that's all we ask for. So that's option one. Give us the 22%, we'll have our own state. The problem is that Israel never believed in this. They lied to everyone by saying we accept the two-state solution, but in fact they were building settlements inside the 22% that the international community designated to the Palestinians as a state. By building these settlements, Israel killed the two-state solution. Every political analyst with a simple understanding of what's happening in the land will tell you that the single biggest obstacle to the two-state solution is the settlements. And Israel has killed the two-state solution by building settlements. Then they would say there will never be a Palestinian state. And finally, 3 weeks ago, they voted in the Knesset by an overwhelming majority that there will never be a Palestinian state. So that's option one. Israel eliminated it. So Palestinians say option two, we'll take it. One state, equal rights. Which is, by the way, how most colonialism ended. One state, equal right. Nothing terrifies the Zionists more than this, because demography says we're equal in number. And They fear that through democracy, they will lose control. Israel wouldn't even discuss this option. So you ask, what's the alternative? The alternative is what we have now: a system of domination, a system of apartheid. Israel is more than pleased to continue this current system. They're content. Why? Because it seems the world does not care about the daily human rights abuses of the Palestinians. Second, they're never held accountable for breaking the law, the international law, or for committing war crimes. And third, they don't have to pay for the cost. You guys are. America is paying the cost of this occupation because America sees the benefit of having an extension in the Middle East. Biden said, if there was no Israel, we would have to create Israel to protect our own interest. It's very clear why Israel exists and how America looks at Israel. And this is my fear. This horrifies me. The third option, which is the current status quo, horrifies me. God is my witness. How many times I met with church leaders and politicians. God has opened so many doors for me over the years. Before October 7th, we would say, we saw it coming. We knew something's about to happen. It's clear. You cannot oppress people and accept no response. We saw it coming. And this is what makes me sad, because we could have avoided this. Yet the world did not listen. There was no political will, to be honest, especially from the Biden administration. Everyone was content with the current status quo. Then came this war. And right now we are on the brink, and believe me when I say on the brink of all of this escalating to the West Bank. It would be a bigger catastrophe. It would be even worse than what's happening in Gaza. That's why I'm here. To plead, we need a new course. This cannot continue. And sadly, it's Israel that has to decide. Either give us a peace to have a state or share the land with us. Sadly, Israel continues to choose the third option of supremacy and apartheid. And unless things change here, I don't see them changing back home. As a concerned parent, pastor for my community, and parent of 2 children, I will continue to hope against hope through my faith in God and through my accepting of this calling to plead for peace, to work for justice, to continue this path. We cannot lose hope, but we're here with the message, this must change here first. Not just in Washington, D.C., where I will continue to go, but at Atlanta, in Detroit, in Chicago, among churches and among Christians, among those who vote. And if it is us, people of faith, are not willing to say enough is enough to how the Bible is used to promote injustice in Palestine, then who will speak? Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Bert will take that section, and I'll take this section. So what we need is a short question with a short answer. We have only 14 minutes and 30 seconds. Any questions? Any kind of a question?
Question, please be sure to use the microphone.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you presented options and identify the U.S. as an important factor for what happens next. So how should the United States government in days, months, and years ahead, what should it do?
What it should have done many, many years ago, and the answer is very, very simple. The international law, unless we think it doesn't apply on the Palestinians, the whole international community has accepted the 2-state solution, 1967 borders. So unless the United States thinks it's above the law, or they have something actually far more better for both people, present it to us. But given the veto power that the United States continues to enjoy, and their continuous hesitation because of pressure for Israel, not to sanction Israel for building the settlements and ruining the two-state solution, and continuing, the excuse has always been Palestinians and Israelis should negotiate. Well, you're not even bringing us to negotiate. Israel doesn't want to negotiate. So what should we do? Honestly, I don't know what as Palestinians. By the way, we tried nonviolence. It didn't work. So the answer is very simple. The international law. The international law said many years ago, and by the way, is this my preferred solution? Not necessarily. But we need to have a reference point. You know what I mean? And if the international law and UN resolutions are not our reference points, then what are? They can't be whatever America decides. America can't always be the big boy in the block and decides everything. It doesn't work this way. There needs to be not just accountability, but a reference point. So this is, I think, what will this happen with people keep asking me with Kamala Harris and or Biden or Trump or whatever. It won't happen. Nothing will change unless the people change and unless the people demand change. I have more hope in the students more than I have in the Congress, to be honest.
And my simple answer will be, we need Eisenhower. We had France, Britain, Israel, our allies, bombing the hell out of the Suez Canal, want to take it. Eisenhower said in 24 hours, if you don't stop, I'm going to bomb the hell out of you. And they stopped. So we do have power.
But I don't want someone to say we will bomb the hell out of you. It's much more simple. Stop sending weapons to Israel. The war would end immediately. Israel will come to the table immediately, negotiating a deal. Stop sending this money and weapons to Israel. And by the way, when people say, sorry, I don't want to interfere in politics, it's across the divide. The biggest single weapon deal Israel received was under Obama. So it's not like a Republican Democrat thing, as people think. It's both parties.
Just wanted to thank you for your historical context and the hard work you're doing for justice and reconciliation. In the moment we're in now, how does Israel negotiate with an organization that by its charter, which is decades old, denies your right to exist and is dead set on your extermination, has already said they'd do it again if given the chance, referring to October 7th. How do you negotiate with that party?
Yeah, thank you. Because you reminded me of saying something. Have you read the charter?
What's that?
Have you read the charter?
Charter of Hamas, have you read it? Yeah.
The new one, the modified one? Because Hamas recently modified its position to accept the two-state solution. Do I support Hamas? No. Do I endorse the ideology of Hamas? No. But here is how I answer that question. First of all, we can't just be concerned with the Hamas charter, which calls for the annihilation of Israel, as some claim. The first one does, not the second one. And not be concerned by Israel's practice on the ground that is in reality, in practice, annihilating the Palestinians. Since 1948, Israel has been doing what many are concerned that Hamas is threatening to do. And Israel has been doing this long before Hamas was created. Now, I really encourage you to go and read something else called the nation-state law, passed by the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, which states that the right for self-determination is exclusive to the Jewish people only, and that Jews have the right an obligation to build settlements on all the land because it's Jewish land. Now, how is this different? How is this different? Then go and read what the current Israeli ministers are saying. Ben Gvir and Smotrich, some of whom actually were considered terrorists by their own state, and now they're in government. So we can't be appalled by one extreme group and not be appalled by an extreme government, given what that government has been doing and is doing. I hope you understand what I'm saying, because everyone is concerned, fixated with Hamas, what they're doing or what they're saying, yet ignore what Israel is doing and has been doing. Now, no one asked Israel to negotiate with Hamas. The negotiating partner, according to the diplomatic standards, accepted standards, is the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And we have a state of Palestine in the UN, observing country. There is a negotiating team that abides by the international law, and it's ready to negotiate. It has been ready to negotiate for years. And that party has chosen against violence to the extent that they have now become, what's the word? People think of them as irrelevant because they've been saying we want to negotiate, but no one's talking to them. So they've lost their credibility among the Palestinians. So if you really want to negotiate, there is a side to negotiate to. It's the side that receives funds from the US aid, from the EU, that's running schools, hospitals, that's trying to build the infrastructure for a Palestinian state. The Palestinian Authority exists. Now, here's the thing. The last American administrations, both of them, the Trump and the Biden, decided to ignore that side. Their philosophy was, if we ignore them, they will come after us and so on. And they struck deals with other Arab countries. Did that work? No, it didn't. Then Biden came and he was the whole time talking to Saudi Arabia rather than talking to the Palestinians. And again, I'm not asking people to talk to Hamas. And the thing that very little people talk about, which shocks me, horrifies me, is that Israeli policy has always been, and please understand, what I'm going to tell you is not conspiracy theory or is not, what's the word, discovered files or under the ground deals or anything. X-Files or none of that. It's information available to everyone to see that Netanyahu has a stated policy of ignoring the Palestinian Authority, marginalizing them by empowering Hamas and creating and strengthening the division that exists between the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. They said it publicly. They said, since the Palestinian Authority is the moderate that's willing to talk and, negotiate, we have to marginalize them. And we have to always insist that the face of the Palestinians be the extremists. Again, people said it. Go and read. To the extent that when Hamas became weaker and less popular in Gaza a few years ago, and Hamas pleaded for support from their allies, Qatar offered to give money. You know what the problem was? How do we get the money to Hamas? Do you know who raised his hand and volunteered, I'll get the money to Hamas? Netanyahu. With the approval of the Congress. Years before the war, cash money would enter Gaza from Qatar, channeled by Netanyahu. Why? Because he thought we want to keep Hamas strong so that we don't have a partner, which is the Palestinian Authority. This was stated. In fact, during this war, a Democratic congressman said this in public, said, why aren't, because, he was trying to go after Netanyahu. Van Halen, I think his name, Van Hollen. a senator. So we need to get the facts. We need to get the facts. And I was just reading, listening to an interview with the previous Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who admitted in an interview that in Hamas's early days, Israel assisted Hamas. Is this strange to you? Well, in the same way, the United States assisted Taliban. In the same way, United States assisted ISIS. Friends, it's all over. It's this Western American influence in our region. Israel is learning it. They, in the beginning, did that. And the fact that no one is blaming Netanyahu now for channeling money to Hamas just a couple of years ago. And he is the one received in the Congress with what, 90 standing ovations. It's ridiculous to me. Why aren't you talking about this? So, and I hope no one concludes from my question that I support violence or that's not, we want to share the land with the Israelis. I've written about it. But let's get the facts real, and also let's be more concerned with what Israel is doing on the ground.
We do have a hard stop at 9 o'clock. Thank you very much for joining us today.